The hospital made $32 million stealing my research. They fired me, took credit for my life's work, and celebrated while I was escorted out like a criminal. But what they didn't know was that I'd built a security protocol into the system. A failsafe they couldn't see. And when the federal auditor arrived 6 months later, everything collapsed in 48 hours. But before I tell you about the moment the CEO called me begging about the federal charges, about watching my former boss get walked out in handcuffs, let me take you back to the beginning. To the day I created something that would change transplant medicine forever. My name is Dr. Nathan Cole. I'm 37 years old. And this is the story of how I weaponized my own brilliance against the people who tried to steal it. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, specialized in transplant rejection. For 8 years, I worked at Riverside Medical Center in Chicago. Not the biggest hospital, not the most prestigious, but solid. Respected. I dedicated my entire career to one problem: organ rejection. Every year, thousands of transplant patients die because their bodies reject the new organ. Even with immunosuppressants, rejection rates hover around 30 to 40% in the first 5 years. It's a death sentence delivered slowly. I spent 7 years developing what I called the Aurora Protocol. A combination of pre-transplant tissue mapping, customized immunosuppression timing, and a revolutionary post-op monitoring system using biomarkers nobody else was tracking. In my preliminary trials with 12 patients, rejection rates dropped to 4%. 4%. That's not just an improvement. That's a paradigm shift. That's billions of dollars in saved lives and reduced healthcare costs. I published my preliminary results in the Journal of Thoracic Surgery. The response was immediate. Calls from researchers worldwide. Invitations to speak at conferences. And most importantly, interest from the National Institutes of Health. The NIH announced a special grant program. $32 million over 5 years for institutions ready to implement breakthrough transplant protocols. I knew we had a shot. I spent 3 months writing the grant application. 200 pages of methodology, data, projections. I worked 18-hour days. Barely slept. My colleague Dr. Sarah Martinez helped me refine the statistical analysis. Nathan, this is incredible. If we get this grant, you're changing the field forever. If we get it, I cautioned. We got it. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Linda Brennan, the hospital CEO, called me into her office personally. Nathan, congratulations. The NIH approved our grant. $32 million. This is the largest research grant in this hospital's history. I couldn't breathe. Are you serious? Completely. You did this. Your protocol. Your research. This is incredible. We celebrated that day. The board sent champagne to my office. Local news came to interview me. I was on top of the world. But I should have noticed the look on Dr. Victor Lang's face during the celebration. Victor Lang. Chief of Surgery. 54 years old. 25 years at Riverside. Politically connected, smooth talker, hands that could operate but preferred to shake hands with donors. He congratulated me that day. Firm handshake. Big smile. Nathan, this is wonderful. We're going to do great things together. I believed him. I was an idiot. The problem started 2 weeks later. I was called into a meeting with Victor and the hospital's legal department. Nathan, Victor began, his voice friendly but firm. We need to discuss the grant structure. Okay. What about it? The lawyer, a man named Richard Moss, slid papers across the table. 4 federal grants of this magnitude, the NIH requires a principal investigator of record. That PI needs to be a department head or senior attending. I'm a senior attending. But you're not a department head. And given the administrative complexity, the hospital feels it's more appropriate for Dr. Lang to be listed as PI. You'll be co-investigator, of course. My stomach dropped. Victor will be PI? But this is my protocol. My research. Victor smiled. Nathan, this is just paperwork. You'll still run everything. I'm just the name on the forms for administrative purposes. But the PI controls the grant money. The research direction. Everything. And I'll defer to you on all medical decisions. This is purely bureaucratic. The lawyer added, it's standard practice. The hospital needs someone with administrative authority in the PI position. I looked at the papers. Something felt wrong. But I also didn't want to lose the grant by being difficult. Fine. But I want in writing that all research decisions go through me. Of course, Victor said smoothly. We'll draft something. They never did. Over the next month, Victor slowly took control. First, he moved the grant money into a hospital account he controlled. For better oversight, he explained. Then he started attending my research meetings, just to stay informed. Then he began making suggestions, changing protocols, optimizing workflows. Then he started taking credit in hospital-wide emails. Under my leadership, the Aurora Protocol is advancing. I confronted him. Victor, this is my research. You can't just... Nathan, you need to understand how institutions work. The hospital got this grant. Not you personally. We all contribute. I spent 7 years on this. And now you have $32 million to continue. Be grateful. Be grateful. But the final betrayal came 3 months after we received the grant. I was called into CEO Brennan's office. Victor was already there. So was Richard Moss, the lawyer. And HR Director Patricia Wells. My throat tightened. This was an ambush. Nathan, sit down, Brennan said. Her voice was cold. Nothing like the warmth when announcing the grant. What's going on? Victor spoke. Nathan, there have been concerns about your conduct. My conduct? What are you talking about? Patricia Wells opened a folder. We've received complaints from staff about aggressive behavior, yelling during procedures, creating a hostile work environment. That's bullshit. Who complained? We can't disclose that. But multiple sources. This is insane. I've never, Victor interrupted. There's also the issue of patient data handling. We have evidence you've been accessing patient records without proper authorization. I'm the surgeon. Of course I access patient records. Records outside your assigned cases, Richard clarified, which violates HIPAA protocols. This was coordinated. Planned. They were building a case against me. Why are you doing this? My voice came out broken. Brennan looked almost sympathetic. Almost. Nathan, we think it's best if you take some time off. Paid leave while we investigate these allegations. And if I refuse? Then we'll have to terminate your employment for cause. Which would be unfortunate for your career. I understood. They wanted me gone. But they needed it to look justified. Victor needed me gone so he could fully control the grant. Control the protocol. Take all the credit. You're stealing my work, I said quietly. We're protecting the institution, Victor replied. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions. I had 2 options, fight and get fired for cause destroying my reputation, or accept the leave and fade away quietly. I chose option 3. I'll take the leave, I said. On one condition. What? I want severance, 6 months' salary, and a neutral reference letter. Brennan and Victor exchanged glances. They hadn't expected me to negotiate. Fine, Brennan said. Draft the agreement, Richard. 3 days later, I signed the severance agreement. I was escorted out of the hospital by security. My key card deactivated. My office cleaned out. I watched Victor through the window of his office as I left. He was on the phone, smiling. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what was coming. See, what Victor didn't know, what none of them knew, was how I'd structured the Aurora Protocol. I wasn't just a surgeon. I spent years learning about intellectual property, data security, regulatory frameworks. When I developed the Aurora Protocol, I registered it with the FDA under a specialized biosecurity certification. This certification required 2 things. First, all patient data collected under the protocol had to be encrypted with a specific cryptographic key. Second, that key was biometrically linked to the original researcher's medical license number and digital signature. The system was designed to prevent data theft and ensure research integrity. But it had a failsafe. If the original researcher was removed from the institution without proper custodial transfer protocol, the encryption key would automatically revoke after 60 days. Without the key, any continued use of the protocol would be illegal use of encrypted patient data, federal fraud, since the grant money was federal, medical malpractice, operating without proper authorization. I built a dead man's switch into my own research. And I never told anyone. When I signed that severance agreement, I activated the 60-day countdown. Victor had no idea. I went home. I waited. During those 2 months, I watched from outside. Victor was thriving. He gave interviews about his groundbreaking protocol. The hospital published press releases. They started phase 2 clinical trials. They spent millions of the grant money on equipment, hiring, marketing. Victor received a $200,000 signing bonus for serving as principal investigator. And every dollar they spent made the eventual collapse worse. Day 58 of my countdown, I sent an anonymous email to the NIH Office of Inspector General. Subject: Potential grant fraud check, IP custody, Aurora Protocol, Riverside Medical, The email contained no threats, no accusations, just a simple suggestion: verify the intellectual property custodial documentation. 2 days later, exactly 60 days after my termination, the encryption key revoked automatically. I was home when it happened. I imagined the chaos. Research assistants suddenly unable to access patient data. Clinical trials halted because the protocol showed as unauthorized. IT frantically trying to figure out why the system locked down. And then the call came to someone I'd been secretly communicating with for weeks. Ethan Blake, federal auditor from the NIH Office of Inspector General. Ethan wasn't someone I hired. He was someone I'd met at a medical conference years ago. We'd stayed in touch. When I knew what Victor was planning, I reached out to Ethan. Gave him a heads up that something might be worth investigating. Ethan's job was to verify that grant money was being used appropriately and legally. And when that anonymous email arrived at his office, flagging potential IP custody issues, Ethan did exactly what I knew he would: schedule an immediate compliance audit. 3 days after the system lockdown, Ethan arrived at Riverside Medical Center. I wasn't there, obviously. But Sarah Martinez, my former colleague who I'd kept in touch with, told me everything. Ethan showed up unannounced. Federal auditors can do that. He met with CEO Brennan and requested all documentation related to the Aurora Protocol grant. Specifically, proof of intellectual property custody transfer from the original researcher. Brennan was confused. Transfer? What transfer? When Dr. Nathan Cole left the institution, there should have been formal documentation transferring custody of the protocol to the new PI. Dr. Cole was terminated for cause. There was no transfer needed. Ethan's expression didn't change. Actually, under federal biosecurity regulations, any protocol registered with FDA biosecurity certification requires explicit custodial transfer. Otherwise, continued use is unauthorized. That's when Victor was called into the meeting. Dr. Lang, you're listed as PI on the Aurora Protocol grant. Can you provide documentation of custodial transfer from Dr. Cole? Victor, always smooth. Dr. Cole's departure was handled by HR. All necessary paperwork was completed. I'll need to see that paperwork. They couldn't produce it, because it didn't exist. Ethan pulled out his laptop. I'm showing here that the Aurora Protocol's FDA biosecurity certification shows Dr. Nathan Cole as sole authorized researcher. And as of 3 days ago, that certification status changed to revoked due to custodial failure. The room went silent. What does that mean? Brennan asked. It means every procedure, every clinical trial, every patient interaction under the Aurora Protocol for the past 60 days has been conducted without legal authorization. Victor's face went white. Ethan continued, his voice clinical and devastating. It also means that all grant money spent during that period was spent on unauthorized research, which constitutes federal grant fraud. That's ridiculous, Victor sputtered. We've been operating in good faith. Good faith requires following federal regulations, Dr. Lang. The biosecurity certification requirements were public record. Ignorance isn't a defense. Brennan stood up. What are our options? 3 options. 1. Immediately cease all Aurora Protocol activities and return unused grant funds. Estimated financial loss: $28 million plus legal fees. Everyone in the room felt sick. 2. Negotiate a settlement with the OIG. Likely outcome: return of funds plus penalties. Estimated cost: $40 to $50 million. Brennan sat back down. 3. Get Dr. Nathan Cole to complete the custodial transfer, retroactively legitimizing the research, and continue the protocol under proper authorization. Victor exploded. We fired Cole. He's gone. We can't just. Then you're looking at option 1 or 2, Ethan said simply. And given the scope of spending, I'll be recommending option 2 to my superiors. Fraud investigations take time, but they're thorough. He packed his laptop. I'll return in 72 hours for a follow-up. I suggest you make some decisions. He left. The moment Ethan's car pulled out of the parking lot, Brennan turned to Victor. Fix this. Now. How am I supposed to? I don't care how. Get Nathan Cole back. Get the transfer done. Save this grant. Because if we lose $32 million, it's not just this project. It's hospital funding, staff, programs, everything. Victor's career was over no matter what. But he could still save the hospital. Or he could go down trying to protect his ego. He chose ego. We don't need Cole, Victor insisted. We can develop our own documentation. Did you not hear the auditor? This isn't about paperwork. This is about federal certification. Something Cole built into the system specifically. Richard Moss, the lawyer, finally spoke up. He played us. From the beginning. He knew we'd try to cut him out, so he built a failsafe. Patricia Wells added, and we gave him the perfect exit. Paid severance. Neutral reference. He has no reason to help us. Brennan looked at Victor with something beyond anger. Contempt. You cost this hospital $32 million because you couldn't share credit. Get out of my office. That night my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Brennan. Dr. Cole, this is Linda Brennan. Please call me back. It's urgent regarding the Aurora Protocol. I didn't call back. 3 more calls that night. Then emails. Then texts. I waited. 24 hours later, a courier delivered a letter to my apartment. Inside, a formal letter from the hospital's board of directors requesting a meeting to discuss mutual interests regarding the Aurora Protocol grant. I called my lawyer. Yes, I'd hired one the day after I was fired. I'm not stupid. They want to negotiate, my lawyer said. You have all the leverage. What do you want? I told him exactly what I wanted. 2 days later, I walked into Riverside Medical Center for the first time in 63 days. The meeting was in the executive boardroom. Full board present. CEO Brennan. Hospital's legal team. Victor wasn't there. Interesting. Brennan started, Dr. Cole, thank you for coming. We'd like to discuss resolving the ICE situation with the Aurora Protocol. Situation, I repeated. That's one word for it. We understand there was a miscommunication regarding the custodial transfer. There was no miscommunication, I interrupted. There was theft. Dr. Lang removed me from my own research, took credit for my work, and collected a $200,000 bonus for doing it. One of the board members, an older woman named Dr. Patricia Hendricks, spoke. Dr. Cole, we're prepared to offer you a generous settlement. Full restoration of your position. Back pay. A formal apology. Not interested. What do you want? I slid a paper across the table. My lawyer had drafted it. I want Dr. Victor Lang terminated immediately. With notation in the National Practitioner Data Bank for research misconduct. Brennan winced. That would effectively end Victor's career. I want to be named director of the newly created Center for Transplant Innovation. Reporting directly to the CEO. That's a significant promotion. I want 5% of all grant revenue generated by the Aurora Protocol. In perpetuity. That caused actual gasps. 5% of $32 million over 5 years. $1.6 million. Plus any future grants or licensing. That's excessive, one board member said. That's fair compensation for saving you $30 million in fraud penalties, my lawyer replied. Silence. Finally, Brennan spoke. If we agree to these terms, will you complete the custodial transfer and continue the research? Yes. And the federal audit? I'll personally meet with Auditor Blake and provide all necessary documentation showing the transfer was completed appropriately. More silence. Board members exchanged glances. Dr. Hendricks leaned forward. What guarantee do we have that you won't pull this again? I smiled. You don't. But let's be honest, you need me more than I need you. I could walk out right now and the Aurora Protocol dies here. Or you could work with me, save the grant, and change transplant medicine forever. While you get rich doing it, another board member muttered. I already did the work that's making everyone else rich, I countered. I'm just getting my fair share now. It took 45 minutes of deliberation. They agreed to everything. The next day, Victor Lang was called into Brennan's office. I wasn't there, but Sarah told me what happened. They gave him 2 options. Resign immediately with neutral reference, or be terminated for cause with research misconduct notation. He chose resignation. But that wasn't the end for Victor. 3 weeks later, after I completed the custodial transfer and met with Ethan Blake to provide proper documentation, Ethan's investigation didn't stop. He'd found something else. Victor had falsified some of the early clinical trial data to make results look better for board presentations. Not related to patient care, just paperwork fraud to justify his bonus. But falsifying federal grant-related documentation is a federal crime. 6 months after my reinstatement, Victor Lang was indicted on 2 counts of federal grant fraud. I was in surgery when Sarah texted me, Victor just got arrested. Federal marshals. Everyone saw. I finished the procedure. Saved another life with the Aurora Protocol. Then I watched the news footage. Victor in handcuffs being walked out of his home. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Just emptiness where anger used to be. He did this to himself. Today, I'm director of the Center for Transplant Innovation at Riverside Medical Center. The Aurora Protocol has been used in over 200 transplants. Rejection rate, 3.8%. We've received 3 additional grants totaling $18 million. My 5% royalty deal has earned me $2.4 million so far. But more importantly, I've saved lives. Hundreds of them. And I built a team that respects research integrity. Ethan Blake and I stayed in touch. He's now a senior advisor at the NIH. We have lunch every few months. You know what I admire about what you did? He told me once. What? You didn't just protect yourself. You protected the research, the protocol, the patients, everything. It was never about revenge. I know. That's why it worked. Victor Lang served 18 months in federal prison. Lost his medical license. Last I heard, he's working as a pharmaceutical consultant in Florida. I don't think about him much anymore. What I think about is the patient I operated on yesterday. A 62-year-old grandmother who received a new heart. She'll live to see her grandchildren graduate college. Because the Aurora Protocol worked. Because I didn't let them steal it. Because I understood something crucial. Your work is only safe when you protect it as carefully as you create it. I learned that institutions don't care about individuals. They care about money, reputation, control. And if you're going to play in that world, you need to be smarter than everyone in the room. Not louder. Not angrier. Smarter. I didn't scream when they fired me. I didn't threaten lawsuits. I didn't burn bridges. I built a security protocol they couldn't see. And I waited. Patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. And when the moment came, when the federal auditor arrived, when the encryption revoked, when the board realized they'd lose everything, I had all the power. Because I'd planned for this from the beginning. So if there's a lesson here, it's this. Protect your work. Always. Build safeguards. Understand the systems you're operating in. And never, ever trust someone who stands to profit from your silence. Because integrity might be rare. But intelligence is power. And I wielded both.